Welcome to the Visionary Chronicles, a business strategy podcast where we provide insight to those looking for creative, executable strategies built around the latest disruptive ideas, innovative cultures, product creators, and marketing solutions. Hello, and welcome to the Visionary Chronicles. This is a series that I'm starting on a new book that I just released. Some of you may have heard about it. Hopefully you have. We've definitely been doing a lot of press releases. It's been a busy, very busy, I'm going to say 12 to 18 months, not just a couple months. It's been an interesting journey. The last podcast that we had done on the Visionary Chronicles, in case you missed it, was actually going through the table of contents or the contents themselves of the book, to give you an idea of, number one, what was my passion behind writing the book? And then secondly, what was the content inside the book? I found it to be a pretty enlightening experience, not only from the standpoint of being my first book, but also one that I had a lot of passion around, not only from the brands that I've been with, the company I started, sold to a VC firm, but also brands and companies and visionary leaders that I've worked with over the years with Liquid Mind. So for me, it was something that putting pen to paper, I had a real passion around. So hopefully you find the visionary brand. The subtitle to it is The Success Formula Behind the World's Most Visionary Brands. And the intent is to give you an idea not only of current brands. What I found intriguing to me was I went all the way back to Andrew Carnegie, to the Rockefellers, to those that built the foundation of what we call our Industrial Revolution. And then all the way towards what we have or know of today, the Apples of the world, the Microsofts of the world, the Nikes, the Adidas, the Pumas. And so I found it to be, for me, kind of a compilation of all these different things. I'm going to call it, I've read hundreds of books, and predominantly they're on visionary leaders or companies. And I found each one to be an intriguing story, and one that I try to put pen to paper on the visionary brand. So the content behind it, the passion behind it, was not only direct knowledge of having started, run, and sold my own company as an entrepreneur, but then also going to iconic brands, the brands that I've been with, Oakley, K-Swiss, TaylorMade, Adidas. All of these brands are very iconic and very in most people's eyes. And I give you kind of a peek behind the curtain, kind of the wizards behind these brands. Who are these people that run these companies and brands? Who are these visionaries? And how do these brands stay successful for generations while 95% of all companies fail? So it's an interesting and intriguing story that I hope you find very compelling and also very useful. And so we go through, again, a lot of areas with visionary brands and what I call these foundational pillars, these areas that are commonplace with each one of these brands. So the book, just to kind of recap, kind of takes through the journey of where I came from, and then secondly goes through what is a brand. Then it goes into vision paradox, those leaders that have this vision paradox of who they are, or what they should be, and what they can't be in order for a company to move forward and a brand to be successful. And then I go into what I call the elements of a successful formula, what I call the creative engine, the positioning of a visionary brand, the omni-channel strategy. I go through the power triad. What is a power triad? It's these three functional groups inside of a company that drive the engine, that put fuel in the car and the engine and drive this Lamborghini down the road, allowing it to click on all 12 cylinders and not just half the power. So it's sales, marketing, and product. That's the power triad that I talk about in detail. And then I get into culture. Not a lot of books talk about culture, and I felt this is a really important aspect of successful brands. Every brand that I've been with, every brand that I've seen that's been successful has a great visionary culture, that they're authentic and one that they stick with regardless of the circumstances of those around them. They don't sell out. They stick to their principles of who they are. So the culture matrix, I call it, is an important chapter in the book. as well. And then I get into product, which most people think visionary brands are just about product, which is not true at all. Sure, they have great performance-driven products, but it is driven by a common vision, driven by a visionary leader, executed by those functional groups inside and outside the company. And I say outside the company because brand equity is driven by the community. So the product vision goes through innovation. Don't imitate, innovate. I talk about breakaway product strategies. I talk about building a drawdown product pipeline, the supply and demand chain, and how you can have products completely along both the front end and the back end, and both are necessary in order for you to be successful, and they can be bridged without you degrading your brand equity. And I go through great stories and actual case studies with brands such as Nike, TaylorMade, Apple, all of these iconic brands that have bridged that gap on the supply and demand chain and been able to execute a long-term strategy successfully by gaining market share without degrading their brand equity or their marketplace positioning. The other chapter then I talk about is the ecosystem. It's a very important thing to talk about today, is the ecosystem, because of how these tech companies are being integrated into our life every day. So when you look at a product, it's not static. It's something that has tentacles to it. So it's something that actually allows us to live our day to day, but it's considered a vertical ecosystem. And I go through that as well. And then another big piece of being a successful visionary brand I talk about is the fuel being the marketing. I call it the fuel because the car goes nowhere without the engine. You can have this beautiful product, but if you don't know how to market as a visionary brand, you're not going to be successful. So I talk about how to be successful in inspiring through personalization, brand ambassadors, the user experience. And then I also talk about the new age that we're living in today, this disruptive revolution that each one of us live through each day, each month, each year. We see something completely different and how we manage not only our business day-to-day, but also our personal day-to-day. So I talk about that on the new age in the chapter. And then I talk about, which is very unique, I feel, to the book, is what I talk about artists. And it goes back to Apple and Steve Jobs' principle of hiring artists, those poets, those that have an appreciation of simple sophistication, he called it. And I talk about that in the book, where it's the artists behind the brands, the companies, the products. How do they integrate with the functional areas on a day-to-day basis, and why it's so critical that you have these creative artists as part of your brand and growing it in order for you to be successful, in order for you to be authentic, in order for you to be able to engage with your community daily. So you want to make sure that you have that authentication, and having these artists is a critical ingredient to have in the formula to being a successful visionary brand. And then the last chapter I felt was also very important. Having living this through myself and starting from scratch, I found that the word entrepreneur being thrown around very loosely was something that I wanted to have a chapter in the book which talked about courage. And courage is really something that entrepreneurs have. If there's no risk, there's no reward. If there's no risk, you don't build successful visionary products. So I put a chapter in the book called Courage. And this really goes through the faith behind those courageous leaders making tough decisions and looking for a higher power to help them make these decisions. So I found the courage is one chapter in the book that all the hundreds of books that I've read, but yet all the people that I've worked with and brands that I've been with, each one of these brands and leaders have had courage. They've had faith. They've had the ability to break down these barriers and move forward and to set a vision for the company and a path forward, and be able to translate that to everyone inside the company and outside the company, and do it consistently and authentically. So there's a chapter in the book on courage. So each one of these chapters I found were important, and ones that kind of pulled together all the ingredients of a visionary brand. So what I'm going to go through in this podcast today is, over the next few weeks here, is a chapter in the book, kind of going through each segment of the book and giving you a little bit of an insight of what I put together before I put pen to paper in order to write the book. So the first one I'm looking at is the first chapter is the brand, the DNA, what I call the DNA of a visionary brand. And so this content comes from the book. The book is actually going to be released this week on February 8th, actually, through all distribution media, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, virtually any international distribution you're going to be able to find either the ebook or the hardcover book. And those who are podcast listeners, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to provide an e-copy of the book in exchange for a review. If you were kind enough to do that, we would certainly appreciate it. So with that, the first chapter in the book is the question I ask is what makes a brand? You know, when we talk about a brand, what is it that makes it? Many people that I talk to, brands that I've been with, most people will say one of four things. Now, there's many areas that makes a brand, but you'll find that most companies will say one of four things. First is product. Second is marketing. Third is culture. And four is innovation. So most people will default to great products. That's what makes a visionary brand. So what I want to make clear in the book is it isn't just one thing. It's many things. And what I found and why I mentioned in the book, the title, the visionary brand, I picked that word for a reason, because there wasn't a visionary brand. As a matter of fact, almost every brand out there has a flaw. In one of these areas I talk about in the book, not one brand has all of these components of what I would classify as a visionary brand. And that's fine. There's some that are so close, but I did not find one which had all of those pieces. But these are areas and starting points for your brand. If you want to talk about priorities and these, what I call these pillars and a foundation of a great visionary brand, product, marketing, culture, innovation, it's not one, but all that make up a visionary brand. So when we talk about these, you know, each of these undoubtedly can be a foundational piece of the makeup of a brand. And consumer perceptions are built on these components of what make up a visionary brand. Most people think of product. Most people will think of, God, it's got a great culture. I'd love to be part of that. Other people look at it from a marketing perspective and go, hey, we love that ad that Nike put out there. Or we love Adidas's product. I mean, or it could be a combination of everything. I love their culture. I love their marketing, their product. They're very innovative. So it could be any one of these components, but the thing to understand is all of these are required in order for you to be a successful and generational brand. So what I've found in most instances, consumers perceive a brand as a lifestyle comprised of many different aspects, both inspirational and aspirational, or as a commodity which just serves a specific need or purpose. And I put that in the book because just because a brand has great revenue. Now, it's a great brand. Let's say, for example, Skechers. Skechers is a great company, not a brand. I mean, it's a brand, but it's a commodity. It's on the good, better, best level. You're going to put them on good and better level, but not best. They're a imitator and one that will copy other brands' great products. So they're the great imitator. But they've been very successful at being the great imitator. So that's what people will perceive as, hey, I just need a product that serves or has a functional purpose for me. I just need a walking shoe, but I want one that's a good quality that's an imitation of maybe what Nike does. And that's what some of these commodity brands or all of them do. And I'll give you an example of a company and a campaign that covered all the bases. And one that to this day is very legendary is the Just Do It campaign from Nike or the Bow Nose campaign. What they had was an opportunity not only to position themselves as a cleat company, as a sporting good company, but also within multiple segments within each one of these markets. So what they did is they took their best athlete, Bo Jackson, many of you have seen it, and put him across every sport. And kind of played off of that where it was hockey, whether it was football, obviously was Bo's deal, baseball, but then they put him in tennis. They put him in all these different sports that aren't Bo's core sport. And that was the brilliance behind the Bo Knows campaign. So they created this inclusionary active lifestyle, I call it, this persona that allowed them to sell products, creating a culture built around demonstrating an inspirational lifestyle. These campaigns reflected Nike's culture and made up of a community of like-minded athletes working towards the same aspirational goal. Everybody wanted to be like Bo, and Bo made fun of the fact that he wasn't a great tennis player, that he wasn't a great hockey player. So it was brilliant because it allowed people to be inclusive but aspirational at the same time. So in other words, it sells a lifestyle more than it sells individual goods or products. Although they made specific shoes as a cross trainer for Bo, these shoes and products and also talking about these different sports that normally wouldn't be associated with Bo allowed them to have a conversation as Nike in all of these different sports that they were a part of and or wanted to be a part of. And cross training was the strategy around the Bo Knows campaign. If you may or may not know of, was the fact that they wanted a cross trainer. So why they were positioning this product across all of these different sports. You may wonder why they just stick with football. Well, they wanted a cross trainer that virtually anybody in sports or any athlete in any sport could utilize as a cross-training shoe. So it was a brilliant campaign, and to this day is one of the most talked about campaigns of all time. And so they're selling, again, that lifestyle more critical than ever in building a successful brand, and that's what they did with the Bo Knows campaign. So it's this culture, this loyalty, building this community, and effectively controlling your own destiny by the fact that you're building a brand with brand equity and one that will carry through on your premium price points and carry through on your innovation and your authentication with your community. And it's authentic and allows you to continue to be the leader in your category and drive that foresight. So selling a lifestyle, controlling your own destiny is a path that is carved through a pandemic, the reality of having to adapt and foresight to know this is the future. So when you look at this in a campaign like Bo Knows, you're going to ask yourself, what does the future look like as we see it going forward? So when we talk about a couple areas on a brand, I'll talk about two areas to start: the brand itself. And in this new age of retail, brands themselves can more easily adapt, engage, create, and control their destiny because of the fact that they are doing their own direct e-com business, the just direct-to-consumer business, which is now commanding a much larger share of their revenue base, and obviously a much larger contribution to their gross margin. So on both ends, the brand is winning, because the challenge that brands always had when they would go in and partner with retailers is they lost control once their product hit the store. And it was a battle to be able to properly message this brand, this premium brand, and make it be a point of difference over a brand that may be racked right next to it. Now, you could certainly do it with product, but brands and controlling their own destiny are built off of consumer engagement and what we call this UX, this user experience at retail, making sure that it is vertical, simple sophistication, understanding what the brand itself from a lifestyle standpoint stands for, and also having that in combination with product in your marketing strategy. That was very difficult when you're partnering with retailers. Having done it myself with many brands and also working with many brands with Liquid Mind, it's very challenging. But once you get that partnership and relationship with retailers, I can tell you they're very accommodating and more than happy to leverage the brand equity that you have. So before this new age of e-com, D2C, user experience was critical to a brand success. So we talk about that user experience as loyalty and authentic engagement are a priority, along with superior products and premium products. So this user experience needed to be controlled by the brand as consumers' expectations shift to pre-purchase and post-purchase engagement. The retailers always maintain the purchase cycle, we call it, the engagement, the actual foot traffic with the consumer, the eyeballs of the consumer, as we say it. So when the brands got that control back, they now control their own destiny and community loyalty. And the retailer was left having to somehow manage their ongoing brick and mortar business. Now, they did partner, those that were effective and those that were left standing did partner with those brands, understanding that they needed this brand equity with multiple brands, but they also were able to partner with them not only in store, but also online. So those that survived this tsunami and this pandemic and going through it, and those that did not survive did not adapt. Those that did survive adapted, like Dick's Sporting Goods and Shields, who are unbelievable retailers, along with Sport Check up in Canada. So all of these great retailers and great partners, not only before the pandemic, but during the pandemic, were very proactive and engaging in this new environment, and they adapted and they succeeded. So you want to make sure that that balancing act is done in this transition, this we call this pivoting, happens correctly, and that they're working with the brands. So I go and I talk about the brands, but I talk about this new age of retail and the control that the brands have going through this new age of retail, and how it's been a benefit to them, not a negative to them, because now they can control their own destiny. And so it represents an opportunity to partner with these global brands for those left standing. So that's an area where I feel an opportunity is still there for retailers, not only on the D2C side, but also on the brick and mortar side, because eventually people want to come in and they want to be able to feel and touch the product, and retailers will certainly have the ability to engage and to successfully transition and pivot back into these brick and mortar stores. So you want to make sure that that doesn't completely go away, but you want to make sure you're maximizing that opportunity. So kind of the end story here when we talk about the brand is I say one sentence. I said, unless you are a brand, you cannot be a brand. Going through and creating a brand is an earned right that's not easily attained. Let's just say we ask those new ventures that were left in the rubble of having to have a great idea only to see it vanish before their eyes. There's a reason 90 to 95% of companies fail. And those that are successful, generational in nature as a brand, a true brand, have a solid foundation, solid foundational principles and vision in place that's authentic, and they don't change it regardless of the circumstances in the real world. So when you look at this, once you have achieved that true brand status, you have pricing and product control, the ability to achieve multi-tier distribution and build a global community loyal to your product, lifestyle, brand, all in one. What a killer combination brands have, and why so many through this pandemic have been successful. Those that, what I call this ostrich leadership, where they stick their head in the sand, hoping things are going to be different when they come out, are the ones that are not succeeding. So this retail revolution is real. Those who adapt without sacrificing their core values are the ones who will successfully build a future for others to follow. So make sure you're taking advantage of opportunities, because you are a brand. And how do you do that? You want to make sure that unless you're a brand, you cannot be a brand. So those that are, maximize that opportunity, this new environment, this new kind of retail ice age that's thawing out. But the new reality of the new age of retail is control your own destiny. The second piece I talk about is evolution. And what I talk about with evolution is, being able to pivot, being able to adapt, but being anchored in your foundational principles and those not changing. Those that flap in the wind, built on a foundation of sand that crumbles, the pillars come down, guess what happens? The entire structure is lost and you have to rebuild. You don't want to keep rebuilding. Just pivot, but don't change those foundational principles that have made you a brand and made you successful to those, and why those that purchase your products, that engage with you, want to continue to do that. So those things that make them a brand in the eyes of their consumer, their community, their loyal following. But there are times where brands do need to pivot. They do need to evolve. But keep in mind, and I keep reiterating the fact that you are a brand. It's an earned right. And when you do pivot, just don't lose sight of your vision, what made you a brand. Keep those pillars in place and what you've already built and maximize it. Brands are built on marketplace positioning, and there's this good, better, best, or premium status. Clearly defined point of differences over the competition, allow you to have that positioning. So don't lose your brand equity by selling out on your product. Make sure that if you establish yourself as a premium brand, the fact is, keep yourself as a premium brand. The pandemic was a clear pivot point for brands. And those who evolved or adapted are still the ones standing today and are extremely successful in their category. But you'll notice those who pivoted did not sacrifice their foundation. That's critical to their success. If you build your foundation on stone, one that can withstand the winds, the storms, the pandemics of the real world, you will succeed. Facing those challenges head on is what visionary brands and leaders do. They set the path for the future, a future others cannot see until they clarify the vision. We've been through and continue to struggle with one of those worst pandemics in our history. However, in case you missed it, those brands who evolved, that pivoted early in the pandemic, are the ones achieving record revenue growth. So engaging with your core customer directly, building that relationship, providing value beyond a product is a formula for success. The brands now have complete control over the product, omnichannel experience with this pandemic. And it's proven a successful formula for them long term. Those who clearly understand the customer journey can eliminate pain points and engage meaningful and authentically with their community will survive. Not only survive, but thrive. So brands are built off this foundational pillar that doesn't change regardless of the circumstances. You can pivot. You can adapt. But remember, you've set a vision, a course for the future that's authentic and one you built your brand equity and foundation off of. Don't change in order to satisfy an immediate need, or you'll fail. So with that formula, this is the first part. I'll talk about the second part in our next podcast. And thanks for joining us today on the Visionary Chronicles. I want to thank you for joining us on the Visionary Chronicles today. I very much appreciate your time. As I had mentioned, we're going to be doing a series of podcasts on the new book that I just released, The Visionary Brand, the success formula behind the world's most visionary brands. Very proud to have that book finally released. It's been 18 months of a labor of love. So I also wanted to let you know that if you contact me at info@liquidmindsight.com, that's info at liquidmind, and it's site.com, or Brian, Bryan, at Brian Smeltzer, SMELTZER.com. Be happy to send you over a courtesy copy of the ebook. Appreciate you being a listener, with the hopes that you'll provide a review, which is always appreciated. Also wanted to let you know the book will be released on February 8th across all distribution channels on a global scale. So that includes Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. I could keep going, but I just wanted to let you know book is now officially released, and we'll be doing a series of podcasts on the book, and hopefully you'll find it as useful as it was me having written this book over that 12-month time frame and being able to put in there the chapters that we'll talk about in this podcast. Again, thanks for all your support. I really appreciate it.